Li Doyan pushed his cart of soil samples down the long white hallway of Kepler Station. The wheels squeaked with each turn, making a sound that echoed off the metal walls. He had been working at the research facility for 8 months now, and he still felt small in the massive space station that orbited the distant planet Kepler for to be. Most days, Doyan worked alone in the botany lab. He tested soil from different worlds, grew plants in special containers, and wrote reports that he was never sure anyone actually read. It was quiet work and he liked it that way. He'd always been better with plants than with people. Today was different, though. Today, Dr. Park Mini had asked him to deliver some mineral samples to the xenobiology wing. Doyan had never been to that part of the station before. The xenobiology wing was where they kept the alien creatures that researched. Teams brought back from their explorations as he walked deeper into the station. The hallways became wider and the ceiling grew higher. Strange sounds echoed from behind thick metal doors. Doyan heard what sounded like singing from one room and a deep rumbling noise from another. His hands gripped the cart handle tighter. He found the xenobiology lab easily enough. Dr. Park Minhee was waiting for him near the entrance, her lab coat wrinkled and her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired. "Doyun, thank you for bringing these," she said, taking the mineral samples from his cart. "I know this is outside your usual work, but I wanted you to see something. Follow me." They walked through several security doors that required Dr. Park's identification card to open. The air grew warmer as they went deeper into the wing. Finally, they stopped in front of a large window made of thick, clear material. "Look," Dr. Park said quietly. Doyan looked through the window and felt his breath catch in his throat. In the room beyond sat the largest living creature he had ever seen. It was at least 12 feet tall, even while sitting. Its body was covered in scales that looked like they were made of crystal or glass. The scales caught the light from the room's lamps and should have sparkled like jewels. But something was wrong. The creature sat perfectly still, its massive head hanging low. Its eyes were open, but they were completely white, like milk poured into clear glass. The beautiful scales looked dull and lifeless. "What is it?" Doyan whispered. "Research team calls it a drachinary," Dr. Park explained. "But its real name is Kethmaran. We brought it here 3 months ago from a dead world in the Vega system. According to our translation computers, it was the guardian of an ancient library. The entire planet was hit by a massive solar flare that killed everything." Doyan watched the creature carefully. Even though it sat motionless, there was something dignified about the way it held itself, like a king who had lost his kingdom but still remembered his duty. "It's blind," Dr. Park continued. "The solar radiation destroyed its optical nerves completely. We've tried everything we know to help it. Medicine from 12 different alien species, surgery with our most advanced tools, even some experimental treatments that cost the station half its yearly budget. Nothing works." "Does it eat?" Doyan asked. Dr. Park nodded. "It eats. It responds when we talk to it through the translation system, but it doesn't move much. I think it's given up hope. Wouldn't you, if you suddenly couldn't see and were the last of your kind?" They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the motionless creature. Doyan found himself thinking about the plants in his lab. Some of them came from worlds where the sunlight was too bright or too dim for normal growth. Those plants had found ways to adapt, to use light differently than plants from other worlds. "Can I talk to it?" Doyan asked suddenly. Dr. Park looked. "Surprised, I suppose so? The translation system is voice-activated. Just speak normally, and it will convert your words into sounds that Kethmoran can understand." They entered the room through an airlock. Space was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows high above. The air smelled like ozone and something else, something ancient and sad. Doyan approached the creature slowly. Up close, he could see that each scale was as big as his hand. The creature's breathing was slow and deep, like the sound of wind through caves. "Hello," Doyan said softly. "My name is Doyan." The massive head lifted slightly. When the creature spoke, its voice came through the translation system as a deep rumble, like distant thunder. "Another doctor? Come to poke and prod the broken guardian?" "No," Doyan replied. "I work with plants. I grow things. The creature's head turned toward him, though its blind eyes couldn't focus on anything. A gardener, it said, and there was something like interest in its translated voice. It has been long since I spoke with one who tends growing things. Tell me, small gardener, do you believe what learned doctors cannot achieve might still be possible? Doyen thought about this question carefully. In his lab, he had seen plants recover from diseases that should have killed them. He had watched seeds grow in soil that analysis said was too toxic for life. Plants were stubborn. They found ways to survive that computers couldn't predict. I think Doyen said slowly that sometimes the answer isn't in the complex treatments.
Sometimes.
It's in understanding what living things really need to heal themselves. Kethmorin was quiet for a long moment. Then the creature lowered its great head until it was level with Doyen's. You speak strangely for one so young. What is it you think I need, small gardener? Ch. Doyen looked at the creature's clouded eyes. He thought about the plants in his lab that had adapted to harsh radiation. He thought about the way some earth plants could actually use harmful energy and turn it into something useful. I don't know yet, he said honestly, but I'd like to try to find out. Dr. Park was watching this conversation with growing amazement. In 3 months, she had never seen Kethmorin show this much interest in anything. What are you thinking? She asked Doyen quietly. Doyen was still looking at the creature's blind eyes. The solar radiation that destroyed its sight, he said. What kind was it? High-energy cosmic rays, mostly, Dr. Park replied. The same type that would kill most organic tissue on contact. But it didn't kill Kethmorin completely, Doyen pointed out, just damaged the eyes. That means its body found a way to survive most of the radiation. He turned to face Dr. Park fully. In my lab, I have a moss from Earth. Common silver moss, we call it. It's one of the few plants that actually thrives when exposed to cosmic radiation. It doesn't just survive, it uses the radiation to make its own light. Dr. Park frowned. Are you suggesting we put moss on an alien creature's eyes? I'm suggesting. Doyen said carefully that maybe we can create a hybrid. Something that combines the moss's ability to process harmful radiation with minerals from Kethmorin's home world. Something that might help damaged optical nerves repair themselves. Kethmorin had been listening to this conversation through the translation system. Small gardener, the creature said. Your doctors have tried to fix what is broken. You speak of helping me fix myself. This is a different thing entirely. Yes, Doyen agreed. It is. And you believe this is possible? Doyen looked at the massive creature, thinking about all the impossible things he had seen plants accomplish in his short career. I believe it's worth trying. Kethmorin was quiet for several long minutes. Finally, the great head nodded slowly. Then try, small gardener. What have I to lose that has not already been taken? As they left the xenobiology wing, Dr. Park pulled Doyen aside. You know, this is completely experimental, she said. There's no guarantee it will work. It might even make things worse. I know, Doyen replied. But Dr. Park, have you seen the way Kethmorin sits? It's not just blind. It's hopeless. Sometimes hope is worth the risk. That night, Doyen stayed late in his lab, working by the light of growing cultures. He had samples of soil from Kethmorin's dead world, obtained months ago for routine analysis. He began the delicate process of creating a new hybrid organism, one that had never existed before. Outside his small window, the stars wheeled slowly around the distant planet below. Doyen worked through the night, guided by nothing more than intuition and a stubborn belief that life always found a way to heal itself, given the right conditions. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of kindness toward a blind creature would soon change the fate of the entire galaxy. For 3 days, Doyen worked in secret. He arrived at his lab before the morning shift began and stayed long after the cleaning crews finished their rounds. The hybrid moss he was creating required constant attention, and just one wrong chemical balance could kill the delicate organism. Before it had a chance to develop its unique properties, the process was more difficult than he had expected. Earth moss and alien soil did not want to combine. The first dozen attempts failed completely. The moss either died within hours or grew wild and uncontrolled, spreading across the culture, dish like green fire before burning itself out. On the 4th day, Dr. Park Minhee found him asleep at his workstation, his head resting on a pile of research notes. "Doyen," she said gently, shaking his shoulder, "when did you last eat something?" He lifted his head and rubbed his eyes. The lab smelled like earth and growing things. Around him, dozens of culture dishes held various stages of his experiments. Some were empty, holding only the remains of failed attempts. Others glowed softly with a pale green light. "Dr. Park," he said, suddenly alert, "look at sample 27. Followed his pointing finger to a dish near the center of his workspace. Inside, a small patch of moss pulsed with a steady, gentle light. The glow was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not the harsh brightness of artificial lighting, but something warmer and more alive. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "What does it do?" Doyen picked up the dish carefully. The moss continued to pulse, as if it had its own heartbeat. "I've been testing it with the same type of cosmic radiation that damaged Kethmoran's eyes. Instead of being harmed by the radiation, the moss absorbs it and converts it into this healing light." He showed her his research notes. Pages and pages of careful observations, chemical formulas, and growth charts. The minerals from Kethmoran's homeworld seemed to act as a catalyst. They helped the moss process radiation in ways that normal Earth plants cannot. Dr. Park studied the data. She was a skilled scientist, and she could see that Doyen's work was careful and thorough, but she was also worried. "This is completely untested on living tissue," she pointed out. "We have no idea what it might do to Kethmoran. Could cause more damage." "It could," Doyen agreed. "But Dr. Park, Kethmoran is already dying. Not physically, but inside. Every day it sits in that room, it becomes a little less alive. What if we could give it hope again?" She looked at the glowing moss for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "We'll need to run tests first. Lots of them. We'll need permission from the station commander." Getting permission took 2 more days. Commander Yun Taiwan was not happy about conducting experimental treatments on their most valuable alien guest. But Dr. Park was persuasive. The moss's properties were undeniably remarkable. On the 6th day since Dojan first spoke with Kethmoran, they entered the creature's room carrying a small biopatch infused with the hybrid moss. The patch was designed to rest gently against damaged tissue while the moss worked. Kethmoran lifted its great head when they approached. "Small gardener," it said through the translation system. "You have returned. Have you brought hope or another disappointment?" "I don't know," Doyan said honestly. "But I've brought something that has never existed before. A living thing that eats harmful radiation and turns it into healing light." He showed the creature the biopatch. Even in the bright lights of the room, the moss's gentle glow was visible. Kethmoran leaned forward, and though its eyes could not see, it seemed to sense something about the small organism. "It feels alive," the creature said with wonder. "Not like the machines your doctors have used. This has the feeling of growing things, of life meeting life." The treatment process was simple. Doyen carefully placed the biopatch near Kethmoran's right eye. The moss's glow intensified slightly as it came into contact with the damaged tissue. "How does it feel?" Dr. Park asked. "Warm," Kethmoran replied, "like sunlight on leaves. I have not felt such warmth since my world died." They left the patch in place for 1 hour, then removed it to check for any negative reactions. Kethmoran's eye showed no signs of irritation or further damage. If anything, the clouded tissue seemed slightly clearer. "We'll do this treatment every day," Doyan explained, slowly and carefully. "Your body needs time to respond to the healing." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Every morning, Doyan would arrive with a fresh biopatch. He would sit with Kethmoran during the treatment, and they would talk about many things. The creature told stories of its home world, of vast libraries that held the knowledge of 1,000 generations. Doyan spoke of Earth, of forests and gardens, of the way morning light looked filtering through leaves. "Your world sounds green," Kethmoran said one day. "I remember green. It was the color of hope where I come from. It is on Earth too." Doyan replied, "On the 10th day of treatment, something changed. Dr. Park was running her daily scans. when she noticed unusual activity in Kethmoran's optical nerves. Damaged pathways that had been completely dead were showing signs of electrical activity. "This is impossible," she muttered, checking her equipment. "Dead nerves don't regenerate." But by the 15th day, there was no denying what was happening. The scans showed steady improvement in the creature's optical system. More importantly, Kethmoran began to move differently. Its posture was straighter, its movements more purposeful. On the 18th day, Kethmoran's scales began to shimmer. Doyan noticed it first during the morning treatment. As he placed the biopatch near the creature's eye, light reflected off its scales in a way that hadn't happened before. The crystal-like surface that had been dull and lifeless for months was beginning to shine again. "Kethmoran," he said excitedly, "your scales are changing." The creature lifted one of its massive hands and touched its arm. Even through the translation system, its amazement was clear. "I can feel it," it said. "It's like water returning to a dry riverbed." "The life force flows again," Dr. Park called for additional medical staff. Other researchers began arriving to witness what everyone was calling a miracle. Word spread through the station that the impossible was happening in the xenobiology wing. On the 21st day, Kethmoran opened its eyes and saw light. It happened during the morning treatment. Doyan had just placed the biopatch when the creature suddenly went very still. Its massive head turned slightly as if following something invisible. "Doyan," it said quietly, "there is brightness." "What?" Doyan leaned forward. "What do you see?" "Light," Kethmoran whispered, "soft and green and beautiful." "I see light." The creature's eyes, which had been clouded white for over a year, were now clear. They moved and focused, tracking objects around the room. But more than that, they seemed to glow with an inner light of their own. "My friend Kethmoran said," looking directly at Dojan for the first time. "You have given me back the stars." Dr. Park ran scan after scan, but the results were always the same. Not only were Kethmoran's eyes healed, they were enhanced. The creature could now see across multiple ranges of light, perceiving energy patterns that were invisible to most living beings. The moss didn't just fix the damage, she explained to the growing crowd of researchers. It created something entirely new. Kethmoran's vision is now more advanced than it was before the injury. But the most remarkable discovery came when Kethmoran looked at a sample of Doyan's hybrid moss under magnification. "Small gardener," the creature said with growing excitement. "This is not merely a healing plant. Look deeper. Look at what you have truly created." Using the room's most powerful microscopes, they examined the moss at the cellular level. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about Earth's plants. "There's an energy signature here," Dr. Park said, studying the readings. "Something I've never seen before. It's as if every cell carries a kind of blueprint, a genetic memory that goes back billions of years." Kethmoran's enhanced eyes could see what the instruments could barely detect. "Your moss carries within it the signature of Terra's life force," the creature explained. "This is not merely healing, Doyan friend. This is transformation. Your world's plants hold secrets that my people have sought for millennia." That evening, as Dojan sat in his lab updating his research notes, he realized that his simple attempt to help a blind creature had led to something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Outside his window, the stars seemed brighter than usual. He had no way of knowing that Kethmoran was already composing a message that would reach across those stars, carrying news that would bring thousands of ships to their small research station. The age of humanity's isolation was about to end. Kethmoran stood at the center of its room, scales blazing with reflected light. The creature had not moved this much in months, but now it paced back and forth with growing excitement. Its newly restored eyes tracked patterns in the air that only it could see. "Doyan friend," the creature said through the translation system, "I must tell my people what you have done, what you have discovered." Doyan was checking the moss cultures that had been growing stronger each day since the successful treatment. "Tell them what?" he asked. "That the origin garden is real," Kethmoran replied. "That it exists, and we have found it." Dr. Park Minhee looked up from her medical scanner. She had been monitoring Kethmoran's recovery for 3 days now, and the results continued to amaze her. "What's the origin garden?" Kethmorin turned its great head toward her. Legend among my people, among many peoples across the galaxy. The story says that long ago, before the stars knew their names, there was a world where life first learned to grow. From this world, the seeds of all living things spread across the cosmos. The creature's voice grew deeper, more formal, as if reciting an ancient text. The Origin Garden was said to hold the secret of Genesis energy, the force that creates and sustains all life. For 1,000 generations, the Draknari have searched for this mythical place. And you think Earth is this place? Dr. Park asked. Do not think, Kethmorin said firmly. I know. Your moss showed me the truth. Every plant from your world carries the genetic signature of the first life. Terra is not just another world with growing things. It is the source world, the beginning place. Doyen felt a chill run down his spine. You're talking about sending a message to other planets, aren't you? I must, Kethmorin replied. This discovery is too important to keep secret, my people. Have the right to know that our greatest quest has ended in success. Before anyone could stop it, Kethmorin began to sing. The sound was unlike anything human ears had ever heard. It started as a low hum that seemed to come from deep within the creature's chest. Then it grew, becoming a complex harmony that filled the entire room. The translation system could not process it properly, but somehow everyone present understood that this was not just music. This was communication. It's a truth song, Kethmorin explained during a brief pause. A mathematical harmony that can travel across the spaces between stars. My people will hear it and understand its meaning. The song continued for over an hour. As Kethmorin sang, its scales pulsed with light in rhythm with the music. The creatures' enhanced eyes glowed brighter, as if channeling energy from some unknown source. When the song finally ended, the room fell silent. Kethmorin stood quietly for a moment, then looked at the humans around it. It is done, the creature said. The message has been sent. Soon, my people will know that the Origin Garden has been found. Dr. Park grabbed Dojan's arm. We need to contact Earth immediately, she said urgently. If other species receive this message, they might come here. We need to be prepared. Commander Yoon Taiwan was not pleased when they explained what had happened. The station commander was a practical man who preferred his research facility to operate quietly, and without attracting attention from the wider galaxy. You're telling me, he said slowly, that our blind alien guest just broadcast the location? Of Earth, too, potentially thousands of alien civilizations. Not just the location, Kethmorin replied calmly. The truth about what your world represents. The Origin Garden is not simply valuable, Commander. It is sacred to many species across the galaxy. Sacred how? Commander Yoon asked. For thousands of years, countless species have searched for their biological origins, the creature explained. Wars have been fought over fragments of evidence suggesting where life first began. Religious movements have formed around the hope of finding the source world. Your Doyon has proven that Earth holds the answers to questions that have shaped the mythologies of hundreds of civilizations. 3 days later, the first ships appeared. Long-range sensors detected them at the edge of the system. Massive energy signatures moving steadily toward Kepler Station. Within hours, more ships joined them. By the end of the first day, over 50 vessels of unknown design were holding position. Outside the planet's orbit, Captain Yoon Seojin, of the Earth's defense force, contacted the station with barely controlled panic in her voice. Commander, we're reading massive formations heading your way. Multiple species, fleet-sized groups. What did you people do out there? The answer came when the communication arrays began receiving messages. Hundreds of them, in dozens of different languages and transmission formats. The translation computers worked overtime trying to process them all, but the basic message was always the same. Is it true? Have you found the Origin Garden? Species that had never contacted humanity before were suddenly demanding answers. Ancient civilizations that had been silent for centuries activated communication systems they hadn't used in millennia. Nomadic peoples who wandered between the stars changed course to head toward Earth's solar system. Doyon watched the growing fleet through the station's observation windows. Ships of incredible variety filled the space around them. Some were organic, looking more like living creatures than mechanical constructs. Others were geometric and crystalline, catching starlight and reflecting it in complex patterns. A few were so alien in design that human eyes couldn't quite understand what they were seeing. "I never meant for this to happen," he said quietly to Kethmorin. The creature placed one of its massive hands gently on Doyan's shoulder. "Small gardener, you gave sight to one who was blind. Did you think such a gift would have small consequences?" "I just wanted to help you," Doyan replied. "And in helping me, you have helped the galaxy," Kethmorin said. "For too long, the peoples of the stars have wandered without knowing their true home. Now they do. They know that life began on Terra, and that Terra's children still tend the original garden." Ambassador Chen Sumin arrived from Earth 2 days later, along with a full diplomatic escort. She was a small woman, with sharp eyes and a way of speaking that made everyone listen carefully. "Son," she said to Doyan during their first meeting in 1 week, "you've managed to make humanity the most famous species in the galaxy. Every government on Earth is asking the same question. What do we do now?" "I don't know," Dojan admitted. "I'm just a botanist. You're the botanist who proved that Earth is the origin point of all galactic life," Ambassador Chen replied. "That makes you one of the most important people in human history." Outside the station, more ships continued to arrive. The fleet now numbered in the hundreds, with new vessels appearing every few hours. Representatives from civilizations humanity had never heard of were requesting permission to visit the station. Colonel Rujiho, commanded Ambassador Chen's military escort, studied the tactical displays with growing concern. "Ma'am, if even half these ships decide to take aggressive action, we wouldn't stand a chance. We're completely outnumbered." "They're not here to fight," Kethmorin interjected. "They're here to witness. The Origin Garden is not something to be conquered. It is something to be protected and cherished. How can you be sure?" Asked, "Because," the creature replied, "those who would seek to harm the source of all life would destroy themselves in the process. These beings understand that Terra is not just humanity's world. It is the birthplace of everything that lives and grows throughout the galaxy." But not everyone was convinced. Intelligence reports from Earth indicated that several aggressive species had already begun mobilizing their fleets. The discovery of the Origin Garden had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. And some civilizations saw this as an opportunity for conquest rather than reverence. As Doyan stood watching the growing armada outside, he realized that his simple act of kindness had set events in motion that no one could control. The galaxy would never be the same, and somehow, a botanist from Earth was at the center of it all. Ambassador Chen joined him at the observation window. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're going to hold the first galactic convergence in over 2,000 years. Representatives from 400 species want to discuss what your discovery means for the future." "What am I supposed to tell them?" Dayun asked.
"The truth," she replied.
"Tell them how a young man with some moss and good intentions changed the galaxy forever." The stars outside seemed brighter than ever, filled with ships carrying beings who had traveled impossible distances just to be near the world where life began. Tomorrow Doyan would stand before representatives of galactic civilization and try to explain how healing one creature's blindness had revealed the greatest secret in the universe. The galactic convergence began at dawn on Earth time. Doyan stood in the center of a massive holographic chamber that had been constructed in just 2 days by engineering teams from 6 different species. The chamber was unlike anything humans had ever built. It allowed beings who breathed different atmospheres and lived in different gravity levels to participate safely in the same meeting around him. Floating in shimmering energy fields were the representatives of over 400 civilizations. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that Doyan's mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. There were beings made of pure energy, creatures that looked like living crystals, and entities so large that only small portions of them could fit in the chamber. Ambassador Chen Sumin stood beside him. She had made it clear that this was Doyan's moment. "You're the one who made this discovery," she had told him that morning. "They want to hear from you."
Dr. Song Hyeri,
The xenosociologist who had been assigned to help him understand alien cultures whispered encouragement. Remember, they're not here to judge you. They're here because you've given them something they've been searching for their entire existence. The first to speak was a being that the translation system identified as the hive queen of the symbiotic collectives. Her voice created harmonies that made the translator work overtime to convert into human speech. Young gardener of Terra, she said, our genetic archives go back 50,000 years. We have compared them with samples of your world's plant life. The match is undeniable. Our oldest life forms carry trace signatures identical to your moss. But we must know, can this Genesis energy be shared? Can the origin garden bloom across our worlds? Similar questions came from dozens of species. The crystalline hegemony wanted to understand how biological matter could carry such profound life force. The machine intelligences were fascinated by the complexity that their original creators had never been able to reproduce. Ancient species that had forgotten their own origins hoped Earth's plants might help them remember their biological heritage. But it was the Void Shepherds who asked the most difficult question. These mysterious entities guided the birth of new stars, and their representative appeared as a swirling cloud of dark matter. Child of Terra, the Void Shepherd said, its voice like the sound of cosmic wind. Your people have shown they can heal what was thought permanently broken. But Genesis energy is not merely creative, it is transformative. Are your people prepared for what they might become if this power spreads? Doyen looked around the vast assembly. Every eye, sensor, and energy field was focused on him, he thought. About his small lab back on Earth, where he had grown plants in simple pots and worried about soil conditions. Now he was being asked about the fate of galactic civilization. I'm just a botany intern, he said, his words automatically translated into hundreds of languages. 3 months ago, I was worried about proper soil pH levels. Now you're asking me about transforming the galaxy. But I'll tell you what I told Kethmorin when I first approached him with my theory. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most elegant ones. I didn't heal Kethmorin's eyes by using advanced technology or complex theories. I did it by understanding what living things need to heal themselves. A representative of the ocean world spoke next. It appeared as a flowing mass of water held together by energy fields. Your approach suggests cooperation, rather than domination. This is unusual among species who make great discoveries. Because Doyen replied, thinking carefully about his words, gardens grow best when they're tended together. A plant doesn't compete with the gardener. They work together to create something beautiful. The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this, and the ancient librarians, being so old they remembered the galaxy's youth, made their position known. We have observed countless species rise and fall, their representative said through crystalline tones. Most who gain great power seek to control it. You speak of sharing it. This is either great wisdom or great foolishness. Maybe both, Doyen admitted. But I've learned that plants are strongest when they grow in communities. They share resources, protect each other from disease, and help each other survive in difficult conditions. Maybe civilizations work the same way. Kethmorin, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Its scales caught the light from hundreds of different energy sources, creating a display that was beautiful beyond description. Honored beings. The creature said, this young human saved my sight not because he expected reward, but because he saw another living thing in need. The Genesis energy responds to such intentions. It cannot be taken by force or stolen through deception. It can only be shared willingly between those who understand its true nature. Over the following hours, a complex negotiation began. Species. After species offered their knowledge, their technology, their resources, in exchange for access to Earth's botanical heritage, some wanted to establish colonies near Earth. Others proposed joint research stations. A few suggested that humanity should be elevated to a leadership position in galactic affairs. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. Just as the discussions seemed to be reaching a positive conclusion, new ships appeared at the edge of the system. These vessels were different from the others. They were dark, angular, and radiated an energy that made even the most advanced species uncomfortable. The Dominion of the Iron Stars, whispered Dr. Songhayeri, checking her cultural database. They're a military alliance that has conquered dozens of star systems through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. The Dominion's representative appeared in the chamber as a holographic projection. It was a humanoid figure covered in cybernetic enhancements, more machine than biological being. When it spoke, its voice cut through all other sounds like a blade. "Am the Iron Marshal," it announced. "I speak for the Dominion of the Iron Stars. We have observed these proceedings with interest, but we must voice our concern. The Origin Garden represents power beyond imagination. Such power requires proper stewardship." Ambassador Chen stepped forward. "And what kind of stewardship do you suggest?" "The kind that ensures galactic stability," the Iron Marshal replied. "Coldly, your species is young, inexperienced, and lacks the discipline necessary to guard such responsibility. The Dominion proposes that Earth be placed under our protection for the good of all civilizations." The chamber erupted in angry voices. From a dozen different species, the translation system struggled to keep up with the flood of objections, protests, and counter-proposals. "You speak of protection," said the Hive Queen, "but your history suggests conquest." "We speak of necessity," the Iron Marshal replied. "Power without proper control leads to chaos. Look at this gathering. Hundreds of species, all wanting access to the Genesis energy. Without strong leadership, this will lead to war." Doyon felt his heart sinking. His attempt to help one creature had led to this moment where entire civilizations were arguing over the fate of his home world. That's when Keth Morin made an unexpected announcement. "There is a way to resolve this," the creature said, its voice carrying across the chamber with absolute authority. "An ancient way, recognized by galactic law for over 5,000 years. The Dominion claims humanity is unworthy to guard the Origin Garden. Let them prove this claim in formal combat through the trial of worthiness." The Iron Marshal's response was immediate. "We accept. Our champion has never been defeated in 47 trials. When do we begin?" All eyes turned to the human delegation. Who could possibly represent Earth in a trial that might determine the fate of the entire galaxy? To everyone's surprise, including his own, Doyon stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The chamber fell completely silent. Then the Iron Marshal began to laugh, a sound like grinding metal. "A botanist," it said mockingly. "They sent a gardener to face the greatest warrior in the galaxy?" "Yes," Dojin replied, his voice growing stronger. "They send someone who understands what the Origin Garden really means." The news of the trial of worthiness spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within hours, betting pools opened on 1,000 different worlds. The odds were not in Doyen's favor. Admiral Yoon Seojin of the Earth Defense Force had arrived at the station with a full battle fleet. But even she looked worried as she studied the intelligence reports about the Dominion's champion. "Its name translates to ending of all resistance," she told the emergency council meeting. 3 meters tall, cybernetically enhanced, armed with weapons that can cut through ship hulls. It has 147 formal combat trials without a single defeat. "And you want to send a botany student against this thing?" Colonel Rujiho demanded. "I want to represent my world the way it should be represented," Doyon replied calmly. "Not with violence, but with understanding." Dr. Lee Minwoo, Earth's premier astrobotanist who had arrived that morning, studied Doyon with interest. "What exactly are you planning, young man?" "I'm not sure yet," Dojan admitted. "But Keth Morin has been teaching me things about the Genesis energy that I never understood before. Plants don't survive by being the strongest. They survive by adapting, by working with their environment instead of fighting against it." The trial would take place on a neutral world, overseen by the Arbiters. These were ancient energy beings so old they remembered the galaxy's first civilizations. The combat zone would be a kilometer-wide biodome that could be programmed with any environment the participants chose. Captain Song Do-an of the newly formed Terra Guard was assigned as Doyin's military advisor.
Jeez.
She was a practical woman who believed in preparation. "What kind of environment do you want?" she asked him as they reviewed the technical specifications. "Desert, Arctic, zero gravity, a garden," Doyon said, without hesitation. "A what?" "A simple earth garden. Grass, Trees? Flowers? Maybe a small stream? Captain Song stared at him. You're going to fight a cybernetic killing machine in a flower garden? I'm not going to fight it, Do-yan corrected. I'm going to show it something it's never seen before. The Dominion representatives laughed when they heard about Do-yan's choice. The Iron Marshal transmitted a message that was broadcast to every ship in the system. The humans have chosen to die among pretty flowers, it said. How appropriate. For a species too weak to deserve the power they have stumbled upon, but Kethmorin was not laughing. The dragon spent hours with Dojin, teaching him techniques that had never been shared with any other species. The Genesis energy flows through all living things, Kethmorin explained as they worked in the station's expanded botanical lab. But on Terra, it flows stronger than anywhere else. Your plants are not just alive, Do-yan, friend. They are connected to the force that creates life itself. How do I use that? Do-yan asked. Not use, the dragon corrected. Work with, become part of the flow, instead of trying to control it. Let the garden help you, and you help the garden. The day of the trial arrived, with great ceremony. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in orbital platforms around the neutral world. The biodome had been constructed according to Do-yun's specifications, containing earth plants that had been grown from seeds he personally selected. As Do-yun entered the dome, he carried only a small satchel of additional seeds and a basic gardening toolkit. The watching galaxy expected this to be the shortest trial of worthiness in recorded history. The Dominion's champion entered from the opposite side. Ending of all resistance was exactly as terrifying as the reports had described. It's cybernetic. Enhancements gleamed in the artificial sunlight, and its weapons systems hummed with barely contained energy. An arbiter's voice echoed across dimensions as it began the formal ceremony. Let this trial determine the worthiness of Terra's guardians, the ancient being announced. Let it begin. The champion immediately charged across the garden, its weapons powering up to deliver a killing blow that would end the trial in seconds. Its enhanced legs covered the distance in heartbeats, and victory seemed certain. But as it reached the center of the dome, something extraordinary happened. The seeds Do-yun had scattered began to grow, not over hours or days, but instantly responding to the Genesis energy that flowed through him and into the soil.
Oh.
Vines erupted from the earth, not to attack the champion, but to redirect its charge. Trees sprouted in strategic locations, their branches forming natural barriers and platforms. For the first time in its existence, the champion faced an opponent who changed the battlefield with every step. The trial continued for hours, not because Do-yun was faster or stronger than his opponent, but because he understood something the Dominion had forgotten in their pursuit of technological superiority. It was not fighting against the champion. It was working with the garden to show the champion a different way. Every time the champion's weapons discharged, the plants absorbed the energy and used it to grow stronger. When the champion tried to cut through barriers, new ones grew to replace them. The garden became a living maze that shifted and changed, always offering the champion new paths instead of dead ends. Slowly, the champion began to change its tactics. Instead of trying to destroy everything in its path, it started looking for ways to move through the garden without causing damage. Instead of using maximum force, it began to use precision. As the hours passed, something remarkable happened. The champion's aggression faded, replaced by curiosity. It began to study the plants around it, to understand how they responded to its presence. Finally, exhausted and with its weapon systems drained by the garden's natural electromagnetic fields, the champion found itself trapped not by force, but by beauty. It stood in a grove of flowering trees, surrounded by vines that could have crushed it, but instead offered support. I do not understand, the champion said, its voice carrying across the dome. Why do you not finish me? I am defeated. Do-yan approached slowly, his hands empty of weapons. "'Cause defeating you was never the point," he said. The origin garden isn't about control or domination. It's about growth, adaptation, and connection. He extended his hand to help the champion up. The Dominion wants to guard the garden by building walls around it. But gardens grow best when they're shared, when different forms of life work together to create something beautiful. The champion stared at the offered hand for a long moment. In its programming, it had never encountered an enemy who offered help after victory. Finally, it reached out and accepted Doyen's assistance, as the two figures stood together in the flowering grove. The watching galaxy witnessed something that had never happened before. Its trial of worthiness had ended not with the destruction of the defeated, but with an offer of cooperation. The arbiters spoke with voices that carried the weight of millennia. The trial is complete, they announced. Terra's worthiness is proven not through strength of arms, but through strength of spirit. The Origin Garden will remain under human guardianship, but it will be shared with all who approach in peace. The weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened. The Dominion of the Iron Stars, the galaxy's most feared military power, formally requested membership in what became known as the Garden Protocols, the champion that had once been called. Ending of all resistance took a new name. It became known as Growing of New Understanding, and it served as the Dominion's first ambassador to Earth. Doyen returned to Kepler Station to find that his simple botanical lab had been expanded into the galaxy's first interspecies research facility. Scientists from hundreds of worlds worked together to understand the Genesis energy and learn how to nurture it on their own planets. But despite all the changes, despite becoming the most famous botanist in galactic history, Doyen still spent his mornings tending to his plants. The only difference now was that Kethmaran often joined him, the dragon's enhanced vision helping to spot problems that normal eyes might miss. "Do you ever regret it?" Dr. Park Minhee asked him one day as they watched a group of young alien botanists learning to cultivate Earth's moss. "I regret helping Kethmaran see again," Doyen replied, carefully transplanting a hybrid seedling that would help terraform a dead world in the outer rim. "Never know," she smiled. "I regret becoming responsible for the fate of the galaxy." Doyen considered this seriously as he worked. Around them, beings from a dozen different species moved through the expanded gardens, each learning something new about the delicate art of nurturing life. "Someone once told me," he said finally, "that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most elegant ones. I just wanted to help a friend. Everything else was just unexpected growth." 1 year after the trial of worthiness, Doyen stood in the observation deck of the newly expanded Kepler Station. Through the massive windows, he could see a sight that still amazed him every morning. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds moved in peaceful formation around the station, each one carrying seeds and knowledge back to their home systems. The Garden Protocols had grown beyond anything anyone had imagined. What had started as a simple agreement to share Earth's botanical heritage had become the foundation of the galaxy's first truly cooperative civilization. "Doyen, friend," came a familiar voice behind him. Kethmaran approached with its usual graceful steps, scales shimmering with the reflected light of distant stars. "The morning reports have arrived from the outer colonies." The dragon handed him a datapad filled with updates from across the galaxy. The coral kingdoms had successfully grown their first Earth hybrid reef systems. The Silicon hegemony had discovered that certain Earth mosses could actually improve their crystalline technology.
Even the machine intelligences had found ways
to incorporate Genesis energy into their systems, creating artificial life forms that were more truly alive than anything they had built before. "Look at this one," Doyen said, pointing to a report from the far edge of the galaxy. "The Void Shepherds are using Earth dandelions to help seed new worlds around young stars. They say the seed's ability to spread and adapt makes them perfect for creating the first ecosystems on empty planets. Your simple weeds have become the foundation of worlds," Kethmaran observed with amusement. "I think you would have found that hard to believe when you were worrying about soil pH levels." Chimes sounded through the station's communication system. "Attention all personnel," came the announcement. "The delegation from the Dominion of the Iron Stars has arrived for the quarterly review." Doyen smiled. The quarterly reviews had become one of his favorite parts of his new responsibilities. Representatives from major civilizations would visit the station to share their progress and learn about new developments in Genesis energy research. In the main conference room, Growing of New Understanding waited with its usual patience. The former champion had changed dramatically over the past year. Its cybernetic enhancements were still present, but they had been modified to work in harmony with biological systems, rather than replacing them. Small plants now grew along its arms and shoulders, creating a living armor that was both beautiful and functional. Juanti Chair, it said, using the title it had adopted after the trial. I bring good news from the Dominion worlds. The report was indeed encouraging. The Dominion's military fleets had been transformed into exploration and terraforming vessels. Their advanced technology, combined with Earth's genesis energy, was bringing dead worlds back to life at an unprecedented rate. We have successfully restored 17 dead systems, growing of new understanding continued. Our people who once knew only conquest now know the joy of creation. It is a strange feeling, but not unpleasant. Dr. Song Hyeri, who had become the station's chief cultural liaison, nodded approvingly. The psychological reports from your worlds show remarkable improvements in social cooperation and individual happiness. It is difficult to remain aggressive when one spends their days tending gardens, the former champion replied. Plants teach patience, cooperation, and the value of nurturing rather than destroying. The meeting continued with reports from other civilizations. The ancient librarians had begun growing memory trees, plants that could store vast amounts of information. In their genetic structure, the ocean worlds had developed coral libraries, where knowledge was shared through the biochemical networks of living reefs. But the most exciting news came from an unexpected source. Captain Songdan of the Terra Guard entered the conference room with barely contained excitement. We've received a message from the Deep Explorers, she announced. They found something incredible in the galactic core. The Deep Explorers were a group of volunteer scientists from various species who had taken Earth plants to the most remote and dangerous regions of the galaxy. Their mission was to see how far the Genesis energy could spread and what new forms of life it might create. What did they find? Doyen asked. Captain Song activated the holographic display. An image appeared of something that took everyone's breath away. It was a massive structure, clearly artificial, but completely alive. It looked like a city-sized tree, its branches reaching out into space, and its roots extending deep into a dead planet's core. They call it the Heart Garden, Captain Song explained. It appears to be a fusion of Earth Genesis energy and ancient technology from the galaxy's first civilization. The plants are using the old machines to restore entire solar systems. Kethmoran leaned forward, its enhanced eyes studying the image carefully. This is unprecedented, the dragon said with wonder. The Genesis energy has evolved beyond its original form. It is learning to work with technology to bridge the gap between organic and artificial life. There's more, Captain Song continued. The Heart Garden isn't just restoring dead worlds, it's creating new forms of life that we've never seen before. Beings that are part plant, part machine, part pure energy. They're trying to communicate with us, but their language is completely unlike anything we understand. Doyen stared at the image for a long time. He thought about the small moss culture he had created in his lab, the simple treatment that had restored Kethmaran's sight. That tiny beginning had led to this moment where life itself was evolving in ways that no one had thought possible. Hey, need to send a delegation? He said finally. A team that includes representatives from every major civilization. If the Genesis energy is creating new forms of life, we need to understand what that means for all of us. Over the following months, preparations began for the most ambitious expedition in galactic history. The delegation would include the best scientists, diplomats, and cultural experts from hundreds of worlds. They would travel to the galactic core in a ship designed using technology from dozens of different species. Powered by Genesis energy itself, Doyen was chosen to lead the expedition, though he still sometimes wondered how a simple botanist had ended up in such a position. The night before departure, he walked through the station's gardens one last time. These were no longer just Earth plants. They were hybrids and new species created through cooperation between different worlds, each one more beautiful than anything that had existed before Kethmoran found him there. Sitting quietly beside a pond where earth water lilies grew alongside crystalline flowers from the silicon hegemony. Nervous about tomorrow? The dragon asked. a little Doyon admitted. What if we find something out there that changes everything again? What if the new life forms don't want to cooperate with us? Then we will learn, Kethmorin replied simply. That is what gardeners do. We adapt, we grow, we find new ways to nurture life even when we don't understand it completely. The dragon's scales caught the light from the bioluminescent plants around them. You've already proven that the simplest approach is often the best. When we meet these new beings, you will do what you have always done. You will try to help them grow. The next morning, as their ship departed for the galactic core, Doyon looked back at Kepler Station one last time. It had grown from a simple research facility into the heart of galactic civilization, a place where beings from countless worlds came to learn about life, growth, cooperation. Growing of new understanding stood beside him at the observation. Window teacher, it said, what do you think we will find out there? Doyon thought about this question as he watched the stars wheel by outside. He thought about a blind dragon who had needed help seeing again, about simple moss that had carried the secrets of creation, about civilizations that had learned to work together instead of fighting. I think, he said finally, we'll find exactly what we've always found when we approach the unknown with open hearts and willing hands. We'll find new friends who just need someone to help them grow. Behind them, thousands of ships followed, their path toward the galactic core, carrying representatives of every species that had joined the garden protocols. They were no longer separate civilizations competing for resources and territory. They were gardeners, all of them, tending to the greatest garden of all, the galaxy itself, and at the center of it all was a simple truth that a botanist had discovered in a laboratory filled with soil samples and growing plants. Sometimes the most elegant solution to any problem was also the simplest one. Help something grow. It will help you grow in return. The age of galactic cooperation had begun with a single act of kindness toward a creature in need. Yes, their ship entered hyperspace, carrying hope and friendship toward whatever new wonders awaited them.
Oh.
Doyon smiled and began planning his next garden.